So here we are, we have arrived at the season finale of Doctor Who Series 12, and what a roller coaster it has been. There's been some ups, there's been some lows, there's been a lot of lows, and potentially this episode is one of them, but we'll get into that, I suppose. We've had a new incarnation of the Master, new incarnation of the Doctor, we've had Jadoon, we've had Cybermen, we've had a crap ton of stuff to unpack this season. But now we're going to focus on the final episode, episode 10, The Timeless Children. And this is perhaps the biggest retcon in Doctor Who's history. I'm probably going to go down one of the most controversial episodes of Doctor Who history, but nonetheless, it was satisfiably enjoyable. I mean, there's just a lot of bold ideas thrown about here. Some are a bit silly, some are interesting, some just got on my nerves, and there's just a lot going on and a lot to unpack. Before we get into any kinds of spoiler territory, I just wanted to say I thought this episode is a bit of there's just too much going on. There's too much going on with the Cybermen, there's too much going to delve into the Doctor's backstory. There's just a lot going on. And that's been a common trope with a lot of these Series 12 episodes. There's just too much going on. And they just need to have more time to explain things. But now I'm going to get into some spoiler territory as we discuss the companions and the characters this series. So, the companions, they get relatively little to do. In fact, this entire season we've been promised lots more development for Yaz, and we did get a bit more development for Yaz. We got a nice little speech between Yaz and Graham about how Graham thought Yaz was the best person he knew, because I believe in Series 11, Yaz said the Doctor was her best person she ever met, and now Graham's returning the same thing about Yaz, because she does all the same things the Doctor does, or supposedly, without a time machine, without a TARDIS. I thought that was a nice little exchange. I thought it was funny when she said, "You're not such a bad human either." I thought that was a very funny reply. And then when she said, "Oh, I'm from Yorkshire," that's basically a love letter. It was like, so is Graham, but I mean, he managed to compose that lovely speech, but it was a nice little moment. Ryan had very little to do again. I think Ryan sort of slipped into the same position that Yaz was in last year, and Graham is sort of in the Ryan position where he's sort of there making the odd quip and just commenting on the stuff, but he's nowhere near as involved as they were last season, which I think is alright to an extent. I mean, it's very obvious that there have been too many companions for a long time, and there's just too much going on at every waking second. But the Doctor herself was a lot happens to the Doctor in this episode. It's a big roller coaster of an episode for the Doctor. They confirmed the pre-Hartnell thing by confirming that yes, the Doctor is indeed the timeless child. Something that I have mixed feelings on, to put it bluntly. I don't really know how to feel about that, if I'm honest, because I think it's just such a big retcon and such a massive chucking out the door of any kind of canon or guidelines. And I know Doctor Who does that from time to time. They basically go against the canon, but never in such a big way. And I think it's debatable whether Chris Chibnall should have been allowed to do that, because I think particularly given the way that he does it, he just sort of slaps it on as if it's just like some bit of, it's a big game-changing episode, they build it up to be and everything, but when it actually comes down to it, it's just a couple of it's quite a bit of exposition from the Master, really, with the odd visuals to accompany it. I did like the fact that they sort of teased it when you realise what Brendan really was. He was just like a sort of coded message to the Doctor left by the mother that picked her up on the outside that gateway. I thought that was a nice way to explain that, and it also kind of makes sense why it wasn't really explained in the Ascension of the Cybermen. But what I would have liked is for that to be explained that was actually a vision, because it just felt like it was just sort of happening alongside the Doctor in this Ascension of the Cybermen. So I think they probably should have made it more obvious with last week's episode, it's not compared to this episode, it's compared with last week's episode, that they didn't have like the Doctor, say, falling unconscious or just sort of having these weird transmissions in her mind throughout the episode periodically, because otherwise it just feels like it was just thrown in there last minute. Maybe they could have been hinting at that across the entire season. I don't know. I feel like hinting seeds about Brendan and then having Brendan in episode 9 be a thing, and then for it to all come together in episode 10 like it has, would have been better, I think, maybe. A lot is a bit... I think a lot is a bit of an overstatement here, because just so much happens to the Doctor. It's kind of too much, as I said. There's just too much to take in from this lie about the Doctor was the timeless child, and the Doctor is the reason why timeless have regeneration. It's just such a bold and interesting move that I think a lot of people were hoping wouldn't happen. And nonetheless, it has happened. We are now living in an age where the Time Lords have gotten their regeneration energy from the Doctor, and the Doctor has apparently been a lot older than we first thought. And to be honest, I don't know how this is going to go down. I can see a lot of people thinking it's a really great idea. And I can see a lot of people saying this is too much. I'm kind of borderline too much, to be honest, because I think it makes the Doctor too powerful, more so than she ever was. I think that, and also the whole mystery of Doctor Who is now kind of ruined, because I think now we have a picture of who the Doctor is. Now we have a more explained about the Doctor than ever, and perhaps too much. I don't think we'll be able to go back to Doctor Who now and see the kind of mystery that we once saw in Doctor Who, and that element of, I think, of Doctor Who's kind of been lost, which is a shame, because we don't know the Doctor's name. I think that would have been a step too far if Chris Chibnall had taken it upon himself to say, oh yeah, this is the Doctor's name, it's Brian, for example. But it's just too much revealed about the Doctor. It's just too much. Part of the joy of Doctor Who is that we don't know everything about the Doctor. I just don't like the idea of knowing this much about the Doctor. But I mean, it's perfectly well written. It's perfectly well explained. I just don't like the idea of it. And that's just me personally. I'm sure there'll be people who are more than happy for this to exist. But also the fact that it is just the Doctor, the timeless child, is kind of disappointing as well. It's sure it's game changing. It's a big idea, but like, it's just very predictable, and I was kind of hoping it'd be something different. The timeless child would be so completely different character. It's just annoying. I knew it was probably going to be either Doctor or the Master or both of them, but I just kind of hoped that it wouldn't be. But yeah, let's talk about the other things in this episode. So let's talk about Sacha Dhawan as the Master. He obviously returned at the end of A Search of the Time, and he just popped up like a sort of like a meme, in fact, actually, the way it just pops up, just like, you know, like you're mid-conversation and then suddenly this random picture from a meme turns off or whatever. But this is interesting. Now, the Master has particularly been an interesting conversation point across the series this far, because the Master has been what a lot of people have liked about this series a lot. A new incarnation of the Master always gets people interested and you excited. Talking of which, the Master is also located in the Faceless Ones, which I saw at the BFI yesterday. You have to see if you can spot him. Like, he's a hidden little Easter egg. There's lots of hidden little Easter eggs in the new Faceless Ones animation, but it's very fun to try and spot them all if you can. But they added him, which I thought was lovely little moment. I noticed it while I was watching it. But enough about that. In this episode, I think we needed more from the Master to really determine how I felt about him. So I'm glad that we did get some new content from the Master. He sort of he gets some nice interactions with Ashad. You see him forming an alliance, and then he obviously kills Ashad, which sort of brings an abrupt end to Ashad, which we'll get to in a minute. But I thought he was quite good in this episode. I'm warming to his Master. I like him more than John Sim, but I really like Michelle Gomez as the Master, actually. I really warmed to her. I thought her arc in Series 10 was amazing, and some of the best stuff from the new series Doctor Who with the Master. the Master hasn't had that much to do in this season, really. Realistically, he's just sort of turned up and done a few plans. He hasn't really... I mean, he's done a big thing by unveiling, like, by destroying Gallifrey and everything, but he hasn't had an overwhelming arc in the same way that Missy did. We haven't had much development on the Master, or the character, or the sort of persona of the Master. He's just your pretty bog-standard Master. He's like if you went to B&M and bought, I don't know, a bargain Master or something, I don't know. It's kind of funny. I do like his tissue compression element, but there's nothing really unique about his Master. It is all... like Jodie, in a sense, is an amalgamation of different Doctor's incarnations. There's nothing you can really define her by that hadn't been in a previous incarnation. Like, for example, Jodie Whittaker is a lot of sort of a mix between Matt Smith and David Tennant. There's nothing, like, usually with each Doctor you can have one defining trait. But with the Master here, he's just an amalgamation of different Masters. And I think... I do like him as the Master. I just don't think there's much unique about him, and he's a very good actor. Sacha Dhawan really delivers a great performance here, but he's nothing special as a different Master. Like, there's just nothing new about him, and I'm still none the wiser about where he fits in the timeline, where he is he before Michelle Gomez as Missy? She's dead, obviously. It's a big plot point that I'm sure maybe there's an upcoming book coming up, so I mean maybe that will sort it out, but it's interesting that they haven't spoken about that. But I think he forms a nice interesting alliance with the Cybermen, although I have to say the Time Lords Cybermen look ridiculous. Whose idea was it to put them in capes and have the Time Lords headbanner things? That just looks stupid. I don't know. I just don't know what was going through their heads when that happened. But it did. So I guess we'll have to move on. But the whole Gallifrey stuff is all a bit forced. It's forced into the episode. It wasn't happening before. You could have had a standard run-of-the-mill Cybermen story finale, and it wouldn't have made any difference to... If you hadn't included Gallifrey, it probably just wouldn't have... It would have just run like a normal finale. It just feels like there's two stories going on at the same time. Like two stories that could justify their own episode. And it just sort of mind boggles me why they didn't just leave the Gallifrey stuff for, say, Series 13. I think you could have had a nice Cyberman arc this series. You could have Brendan be this new thing. And you could have had a reference to the Timeless Child, sure. Have another, couple of references sewn in, like you did in Series 11. You had someone mention it. And then you could have... you could just, then come Series 13, this Gallifrey thing could be its own arc. And I think it would justify its own arc as well. But I also think the Cybermen could have justified their own arc. So I'm in two minds as to why they didn't just... I mean, I don't know what they've got planned for Series 13. I think it's got something to do with the cliffhanger, but, I mean, we'll see, won't we? But I just think it could have been so much better if it had been two different story arcs in its own right. I think all the Gallifrey stuff is just squished and compressed, it's tissue compressed into far too long. Into far too short a little moment. And it just doesn't quite glue together in the way I would like. Cybermen, after, much like in Spyfall actually, the whole story with Daniel Barton was all sort of tossed aside in part 2 to make way for the Master and this big plot line with the Timeless Children. But in this case, not is it just an entire episode that's been sort of shoved to a side, but it's actually kind of, in a way, an entire story arc. A story arc that had been building over a good 3 episodes. You had the reference in Future of the Jadoon, then you had Villa Diodati, which sort of built into it, and then you had Ascension of the Cybermen, which was sort of the deliverance, and then this should have been the big conclusion to the big Cyberman story. But unfortunately, all the Cybermen cool stuff that was going on is chucked in the bin, because we need to make time for retconning all of the Doctor's history. Well, it's not retconning all the Doctor's history, but it's retconning any kind of point that William Hartnell was the first ever Doctor, and that doesn't really... I thought maybe I could have gone over it, but the way it's just sort of shoved in as part of the episode just completely unjustifies it. I can see a world where it could have worked if you built an entire series, you'd actually given the justification for an entire 2-part story about that, rather than shoving in the Cybermen as well. But here it's just shoved in and sort of messed up. But here, the Cybermen are sort of shoved aside to make room for the Gallifrey stuff, so that it can work in what little time it does have, even though this is a 65-minute episode, there still isn't enough time, because it needs to be a 2-part episode just about this Gallifrey thing. So the Cybermen sort of feel pushed aside to try and deal with that. They just sort of stand there and shoot at people for what screen time they do have. None of the companions feel any side effects of the Cybermen. They all get home safely, which makes me wonder whether they'll be back in series 13, or indeed the festive special, which they confirmed at the end of the episode. But here, the Cybermen are just sort of trying to hunt down the humans and just deliver them, and it's kind of a bit anticlimactic, because there was this big Cybermen army building up, and you think, oh, surely this is big news and big problem for the Doctor, and she's gonna have to sort of defeat them all, and maybe there's gonna be some consequences for some of the characters. In reality, only one of the characters die, and I'm just like, come on, you could have killed off another couple. I mean, Koshama sacrifices himself at the end of the episode to defeat the new Time Lord Cybermen, which is such a stupid idea. These new Time Lord Cybermen they look stupid. They've sort of got these frowning faces. They've got these tear ducts, sort of, not at an angle, but, directly pointing down. And they've got these stupid capes. It's just, I like the new design head. I don't like what's below it. I think it looks a bit weird below the head. I haven't really liked any of the new series Cybermen designs that much, apart from the new Mondasian Cybermen they did a couple of years back. But they just look ridiculous, and I mean, the fact they can just Cybermen that can regenerate. First of all, that happened in Magician's Apprentice with the Daleks. The Daleks harvested the regeneratory energy from the 12th Doctor, Peter Capaldi. So not only is that stealing yet another idea from a previous episode rather than coming up with an original thing, it's just... I had so much hope for this finale. I had so much hope that it would deliver. I should have known better, to be honest, because I just think Chris Chibnall was taking on far too much with the Cybermen, the Time's Children, and it just doesn't work. Even Ashad, which we're going to talk about now, even Ashad, who just sort of gets pushed aside, and he comes to Gallifrey and he tries to form this alliance with the Master, and obviously it doesn't work because the Master wants to be an organic life form, but this guy wants to get rid of all organic life forms now. That's his ultimate goal, to remove anything that makes the Cybermen actually Cybermen and not just robots, because that's kind of defeating the point in the Cybermen again. But yeah, but Ashad just gets killed. He just gets killed, and it's kind of pointless. What was the point in him even being there? I mean, sure, the John Barrowman, the Master talks about them being a new empire rising, because the Doctor gives away the Cyberium to Ashad. But is it really Ashad's fault that him? I mean, it just kind of seems a bit. It just doesn't work for me. He just sort of just appears and then just shot. Well, he's not shot. He gets miniaturized. This death particle thing ends up being the resolution of the episode. But he talks about how he was going to use it to destroy all organic life forms, but it can only destroy all the organic life forms on a planet. And, I mean, if he had used it, he would have killed himself in the process, because he's not entirely robotic, so you wouldn't be able to repeat the experiment, would you? So, I mean, I'm confused about how that works. The whole death particle thing was a bit stupid. It's just yet another situation for the Doctor to be able to destroy her home planet again, so that we can have the Doctor go back to being the moody old Davy Tennant again. And it just kind of feels a bit lazy that Chris Chibnall didn't think of something original. Because there's plenty of original stories. This is a show with unlimited capacities. And, to be honest, I think, in a way, Series 11 did take it in the right direction, by doing something boldly different. Sure, they were just sort of round-the-mill Doctor Who stories, but that's all you don't need to have anything game-changing. And I kind of like Series 11 for not doing anything big or bold, because it made a difference, because after having several, seasons of just constantly trying to rewrite, canon in different ways, it was nice to have something. It was a nice little adventure. It was a nice little bit of escapism. It was like watching a Disney movie. And then this comes around and it's just sort of earth-shattering all canon and everything that ever made sense. But Ashad was kind of pointless in the end because he just gets thrown aside in fact, he gets turned into a tin soldier and chucked on the floor, like he was some kind of toy or plot device, which in the end he kind of was. But this is a shame because I really was starting to think Ashad could be a good villain. Like, I thought he had a great presence in Haunting of Villa Diodati, and then in episode 9 I thought he was still very good. He wasn't as good as in Villa Diodati. I think Villa Diodati remains to be the best episode of the series. And Ashad was a big part of that. He kept up that big gothic horror sort of vibe that the episode had set up even before the time we were in it. And then this just sort of becomes a bit silly. I think it's the word for it. Cast. They were all still quite nice. They were serviceable guest cast members. I think Ko Sharmas was probably the best. Probably because he's actually got a memorable name, which a lot of characters I've noticed in the Chris Chibnall era don't have a particularly memorable name. I think he does a great job. He has a nice moment at the end where he sacrifices himself. I think the actress who reminds me of Kate O'Mara, she actually played someone in the Sarah Jane Adventures I can't remember the name of now. But I think she's still great. They all have this nice fun little plot where they dress up as Cybermen to try and get off the ship and without dying, obviously, because they just get zapped on sight if they realised that they weren't Cybermen. So they had a nice little moment with that, again with the companions. The companions just get nothing to do. They haven't had anything to do all season, really. They've just sort of been there. I think they've just sort of been there the entirety of this run, really. There's been a little bit of character development, but they've never actually actively done anything in the story to contribute to the conclusion of the story. They've just sort of stood there. But there's one member of the guest cast who just sort of gets killed off very quickly, and she was the character that got the least to do in part 2. I think it'd been nice if they killed off all the characters that had a lot to do, like that I can't remember his name, that kid pilot. If that kid pilot had died, I thought he was going to for a minute, and that might have given room for another character to have a couple of decent moments in this episode, because I mean, you can't have every character be the star of every episode when you have a cast this big. I was kind of glad that they did kill off quite a few characters at the start of Essential Assignment, because otherwise having 7 characters hanging around would have been too much. I mean, that's the size of a small classroom, for goodness sake. I mean, if you think 7 plus 3, 10, that's 11 characters. Plus the Master and the Cybermen, there's just a lot of characters in every... That's another thing with Chibnall is there's just too many characters, there's just too much plot going on, and there's lots of bold ideas. But yeah, I mean, they were all great characters. They're all serviceable. They're pretty standard guest cast. I think it's nice that most of them survived. They went back to 21st century England. But yeah, they were all fine. They weren't the problem with the episode at all. I mean, I don't have particularly... I think it's still an enjoyable episode. There's nothing particularly boring about this episode. It keeps you on the edge of your seat. You constantly want to know the answers. But yeah, it's just not a great conclusion to the series. But let's talk about this in conclusion. Wait, before we conclude, there was a cliffhanger at the end of the episode. The Jadoon turn up and take the Doctor prisoner, and then suddenly on a secure planet type thing. That looks like Demon's Run. Just saying. But I hate it when they end a series on a cliffhanger, especially when there's going to be such a long wait until not only the next series, which is 18 months away by the looks of it, and then there's the festive special, Revolution of the Daleks, which looks like I don't know how they're going to get the Doctor out of that situation, because the Doctor's very clearly on herself. What I think might happen, because again, John Barrowman said he would turn up at some point, he'd be there for the Doctor, so I would assume that at some point Master... hang on. If Captain Jack was the nanogene sort of took him with the spaceship that he was stealing, what if he's ending up in that prison? Maybe that's how he comes back and he saves the Doctor, and then they get back time for Earth to find the fam. I don't want the fam to come back, but I think they will. The press release that I just looked up before I made this video is the Doctor and her friends will return this festive season. They don't know when it's going to air. I would suspect probably New Year. I don't think it's going to be Christmas. I want it to be Christmas, but I don't think it will be. I don't know what this arc that they're setting up for series 13. Maybe they're escaping and they're constantly on the run from maybe they're constantly on the run from the Jadoon for the entire series. I think, actually, given that evidence that I've just compiled, that theory I've compiled in my head, I think Captain Jack, I think it's a reasonably solid bet that Captain Jack could be in the festive special. He is apparently, I noticed from his Instagram feed, that he has been in Cardiff recently, concluding filming on a top secret project. So who knows, maybe it's Doctor Who. A lot of people are suspecting it's Torchwood. I don't think it's Torchwood. I think we'd have a proper announcement that if that Torchwood was returning before they started filming it. I don't think they'd be able to keep it a surprise that long. But yeah, it's interesting. We'll see what happens with that. But in conclusion, this finale is it's a reasonable end to this series. But this series started off for me with hope of it being an improvement. Has it been an improvement overall? We'll have to talk about in my season overview, which will come out soon over the next week. Presumably. But I just don't know what to make of this finale yet. I think I may leave it until next Sunday to do my overview, because I need this finale to simmer in my head before I make any conclusions about this episode. I need these ideas to have been in my head for a while for me to properly understand them before I make a judgment. But I am going to say, out of this moment, I thought it's probably, in terms of quality, just as good as Ascension of the Cybermen, but I did enjoy it more than Ascension of the Cybermen. So I'm going to give it a 6 out of 10. There's no Doctor Who next week, which is a disappointment, but I'm sure there'll be plenty of teasers. I suspect we'll see a teaser for Revolution of the Daleks, probably Comic-Con, I'd imagine, at the earliest. I remember Comic-Con got it might have been New York Comic-Con, we got our first trailer for Class and Return of Doctor Mysterious, similar situation. I don't know when Series 13 will be. Hopefully that cliffhanger gets resolved in Revolution of the Daleks, because I don't think I could wait that long with the Doctor in prison for an entire episode and the companions hopefully still trying to deal with it. But I think they could do it. I think that could work, actually. Have Yaz using her police skills, but I think it would be best if the companions did leave. I think this would probably be best if this was their departure. As I said, they sort of just materialise in the 21st century Earth. It's not really explained what's happened to them. I mean, we don't know. We don't know if they're going to come back or not. I think we need an answer on that, to be honest. I suspect we won't know until we see them in a trailer. But we'll see. We'll see, won't we? We'll see. But overall, I thought this is solid. I don't think it's a great finale, and I think I need time to think about it. But yeah, that's my thoughts on Doctor Who Series 12, the finale. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments section down below. And if you like this video, please leave a like and subscribe down below. Thank you very much, and enjoy your rest of your evening.